Welcome everyone to Bitcoin Magazine's Meet the Taco Plebs. Another excellent day in the Bitcoin industry. Before we begin, I, as always, have to tell you about Bitcoin 2022 happening in Miami, April 6th to the 9th. It's going to be awesome. You can get 10% off with the code Taco Plebs. You also get an additional $100 off if you purchase the general admission with Bitcoin and $1,000 off the whale pass if you purchase with Bitcoin. And if you're looking for some technical analysis, I also have a code for you, Macro21, for Bitcoin Magazine's deep dive product. Fantastic content being put out daily by Dylan and Sam. So excellent product if you're looking into trading, on-chain analysis, etc. But without further ado, we have an excellent guest here today. Austin, our media operations from the magazine. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. It's excellent to have someone on the show who I work very closely with, and he really is one of the main points for getting these contributor posts, which I so cherish. And so, yeah, it's been great to have you on the team. You've been doing, great work, getting some really fantastic content for us. So let's jump right into it. First, I want to ask you how you got introduced to Bitcoin. What led you to our rabbit hole?
So I used to work in traditional finance for a small startup. I used to trade futures, nothing for a big desk or anything. It was more personally and more coaching along with that. So I would kind of teach people how to get their feet wet and try not to get wrecked when they just jump in. So a little bit of education in the beginning goes a long way when getting introduced into the markets. So I started with that, and I always kind of knew from that background, like reading a bunch of Zero Hedge and stuff like that, something was wrong with the legacy financial system. And it's not really new. I think a big event was obviously the '08 crisis, and I was a little bit too young to remember how like severe of an event it was, because I was a little bit too young to have any significant kind of money, anything like that, before I started really my workforce job and stuff like that. I was just starting high school. So that being said, that's kind of why I was looking for an answer. And gold was usually the go-to answer in the legacy system, but that obviously has a lot of problems with it. So started looking more into Bitcoin. I think I found it around 2017. Again, working in classic finance stuff. Didn't want to chase the chart. Saw it was kind of a bubble. It was in hindsight, but obviously in the long term, it's not. Really, I don't think it's ever going to be in a bubble. It just keeps on growing, because there's a lot of market share to eat there. If we really goes where we think it's going to go, here at like Bitcoin Magazine and other Bitcoin believers in general, there's still a long way to go. We're only at 1 trillion. We're looking at hundreds of trillions by the end, of this whole switch from legacy to hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you have that traditional sort of finance background. I guess, to sort of branch off of my usual direct, from the script questions, I would ask you, what's like the primary difference you notice from, the traditional finance and like the Bitcoin industry in terms of like culture and goals and what they envision for like the future?
It's pretty interesting to look at because Bitcoin's so new. It's almost like a startup in a sense. If you're looking at the traditional finance, it's been there for so long. There's stuff being built on top of other products and layers, and it's already kind of set in its ways. So people that grow up in the culture, there's already been a culture kind of set, so to speak. So there's Wall Street back in like the '80s, they're making movies about it, right? And it's not much has really changed on Wall Street in a pretty significant amount of time, because I think, like I said, it's already set in its ways. Whereas Bitcoin can still be whatever it wants to be, and we're still kind of building it. So it's a lot more, again, startup like, quicker pace, can change, and there's a lot more innovation being done. Being digitally native is really interesting because it can just change so quickly.
Yeah, such a dynamic industry with, like you said, so many developments constantly going on. It really is the internet's currency and the internet's asset. So, but jumping back on our pre-selected questions, I'm curious what life lesson you would consider you've learned from Bitcoin. I mean, there's a lot to take from it, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say time in markets rather than timing markets is a huge one for me, and that kind of builds on the low time preference. So again, I used to trade, leverage, stuff like that. Never got wrecked or anything, but there is something to be said for I've made a lot more returns just buying, hold. But that usually wasn't the case before Bitcoin because there wasn't such a dynamic asset such as Bitcoin until really since I found it. But obviously people have been getting these kinds of returns since 2013 or so. But like I said, still a long way to go in that. And just low time preference. Don't try to time the markets. Don't try to be the top caller or the bottom caller. Just allocate, DCA, do whatever you want to do, but just make sure your money's not in, cash, right? That's the big thing.
That's definitely an important lesson to take away from Bitcoin is do not leave your money in cash. If there's anything to be learned. But yeah, no, I think it goes back to Bitcoin being savings, the time in markets versus timing markets, right? And it just makes things simple. You don't have to think about whether or not you're getting in at the right time, whether or not there's going to be a huge crash after you get in, et cetera. It's just continuously adding to the stack, which is a great thing for people who aren't trying to be daytime or part-time investors. But go ahead.
I was gonna say exactly. It just makes it so much easier, and it really was a big change in my mindset. Instead of trying to get returns every day or every week or every month, it's just start
Right.
stacking, hold it.
Such a change to the short term look forward, like quarterly. We need to get these earnings by this time and do anything to do that sort of mind frame, which working at a Bitcoin industry, Bitcoin only company like we are, I think we really get to benefit from that culture as a whole here. Like we can look forward into the future like further than most companies because we know that what we're doing is like a long term change. There's like a longer time preference to these goals that we have, and so I think it really spreads throughout the company. But I guess moving on, what aspect of the Bitcoin community do you believe best represents the ideals you would like to see in the world? That could be so many things, but
I'll keep this one simple. Fix the money, fix the world. Marty Bent, and I think that one just hit home because I just see so many things on a day-to-day basis, or talk with friends, or stuff like that with all the stimulus stuff that came out, and all these crazy prices and inflation and everything that kind of my normal friends kind of see. I just boils down to, well, if you fix the money, this would be fixed. So fix the world, right? So I think there's just so many knock-on effects that would happen if you fix the root and the source of everything, which is the monetary policy, what we transact in, what we trade in. I think Breedlove kind of talks about this a lot. It's the first time we would ever see true capitalism all the way through. There's no other forms that have been that pure, but have been attempted in the past. So I really think if we can get on a Bitcoin standard, which I believe we will eventually. Again, I don't know a time frame for that, but I would say quicker than people think, but longer than we're expecting right now, which is kind of vague, but so fix the money, fix the world.
yeah, well, Bitcoiners have a very, we'd love to see this all happen right here, right now, in the next, shortest time span possible. But, the real world is so dynamic, and it really does come back to, monetary policy encourages short-term thinking and spending, and Bitcoin could potentially fix that. And I think what we previously discussed about, the difference in company culture, being short-term minded versus long-term minded. It's just an example of like this sort of fix the money, fix the world problem where, um, you know, the quarterly, the hunt for the quarterly goal or whatever, that is sort of fixed by having a money that doesn't need to be, turning over so often. And yeah, I just think I think we really have a good chance to implement the ideals of Bitcoin throughout the world by individuals, and I think the community that we're fostering at Bitcoin Magazine, especially the contributor community, which you and I are both a big part in, I feel like we're creating like a giant group of individuals who really can go out in the world in their industry and bring like those sort of ideals to the forefront,
Yeah, it's grassroots, but I think the longer it goes on, the bigger a community gets kind of underneath the surface, and then eventually just overtake the majority. You kind of see that with the senators and all these coming out. I think it starts with a few, it builds and builds and builds until eventually you just overthrow the consensus.
Right. Yeah, the few becoming the many, and that's just through the natural incentives that Bitcoin gives people. But moving on, there's a lot to be looking forward to in our space. There's so many developments, and there's also just long-term ideas that Bitcoiners have. What would you say you're most looking forward to in the Bitcoin space?
It goes back to just hyper Bitcoinization, and what I mean by that is Bitcoin like replacing bonds as collateral. I think that's a big one. So when you can overtake the bond market, that's kind of how the legacy financial system kind of operates. That's everyone's collateral. That's what they post. That's what they print. That's what they move around and manipulate with interest rates and all that stuff. Once you can get Bitcoin to be a bigger market than that, I really think there could be some change in terms of the knock-on effects, which we just previously talked about with fix the money, fix the world. I think that's going to be a huge factor if Bitcoin can become bigger than bonds. Again, I think it will happen. I don't know how long that'll happen, but I think that will defund the Fed essentially in terms of their power and what they can do to the kind of the money supply, because it's all based around the bonds. I mean, the cash is not, they don't actually, what they keep on saying, they don't print actual dollars. They just, they actually make treasuries. So I think they would definitely cut them at the knees, so to speak, the Fed. So reduce their power dramatically if Bitcoin became big enough.
Yeah, I mean, many things that we're referring to are at its root federally funded, and that's where the source of many of the issues that our economy are facing come from, and that's all because of like you said, the money is being issued as treasuries, so it's just being controlled by what really is a private entity. And yeah, I remember the cool graphic that we had at Bitcoin 2021, and it was from I forget the name of the artist, famous Bitcoin artist, but it said defund their power in big letters, and it was $1. And it's like literally, when you opt into Bitcoin, you're defunding the power of the Federal Reserve, and therefore the state, which is, if you're a crypto anarchist or any sort of anarchist in the slightest, it's golden. So fantastic.
Yeah, I do get behind the idea of some government, but I think it needs to be more localized. I think the federal government overseeing, 50 states, it's not realistic. You can see how each state kind of have their own personality as of late. Each jurisdiction, they're speaking out, and they're making their own rules. So I definitely see localized being more state, city, county government rather than federal. And I think if we can defund the Fed a little bit with their power to manipulate the money, I think we can get to a place like that.
And not to mention what the greatest thing that we're defunding is the warfare colonial arm of the American government, which basically treats the world as its playground, manipulates politics all over the globe to achieve its goals, and especially related to energy. So that's, what we're really defunding is a war machine that is responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths every year. Defund the power, right? But back on the, I guess moving on, it's kind of related. What do you believe the price of Bitcoin will be at the end of 2021? And hopefully, given the potential debasement of bonds and the, Bitcoin's uprising, what do you believe the price of Bitcoin would be towards the end of 2030?
So this one I've gone back and forth with at the end of the year. I'm definitely in the camp that's going to be over 100K. I think it'll be in between 100K and 200K.
Mm-hmm.
Don't necessarily know if that'll be the top for this intermediate phase, next year or two. But I do think by 2030, we're going to be seeing, that $100 trillion market cap. So 5 million plus in today's dollars. I do think it will overtake the bond market in the next decade. So that's 1 year short, right? Or so we got, hopefully this next decade, we can do what we were just talking about, defund the Fed and get to a place where it's a real competitor on a global stage. $100 trillion or so would be a big market, and it can actually change things if it's that big.
Yeah. Not, we're not just defunding the Fed. We are funding the innovators that are building on a platform of freedom and open sourcedness and free speech. So, it's really not so much like it's not draining the value out of the world. It's just shifting it from a useless, blood-sucking life force to, a glorious realm of Bitcoin. So,
yeah.
Everyone benefits when we're funding people who want to build on freedom,
and globally too. So I think people get lost in it and they think about their own kind of world. It's easy to do, but then you hop on Twitter, you can see this is a global phenomenon. So it's really it's fun to live through.
Yeah, I mean, so many of our contributors are global. It's really great to get, all of our content from around the world, and it's great to connect with Bitcoiners all around the world. But yeah, it's been a great conversation, Austin. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Everyone, make sure to get your conference tickets. Use code Taco Plebs. Get your deep dive subscription. Use code Macro21. And thanks again for coming on the show, Austin.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
And everyone, be sure to tune in to the next episode of Meet the Taco Plebs. We'll have another fantastic guest, and take care.